to Sailor Sasquatch, where we share Sasquatch evidence as well as encounters. I am very excited about this video today because we are going to be featuring Bob and Kathy Strain. Kathy Strain is an archaeologist and anthropologist for over 20 years, and she has been studying the subject of Sasquatch for almost as long. She is the Forest Heritage Resource and Tribal Relations Program Manager for the Stanislaus National Forest. Being somebody that is married into a tribe and lives on a reservation, I love all things Native culture. This book is one of my very favorites that I have come across since being into the subject of Sasquatch. While Kathy is speaking, I'm going to show you some illustrations and stories from the book. I highly recommend that you get this book if you are into the subject of Sasquatch. I will link the book down in the description if you want to get yourself a copy. Now, we went to a Sasquatch conference in January, and Kathy was a speaker there. So this is where we filmed Bob and Kathy, and this is not an ideal scenario. There's a lot going on, so please excuse some of the background noises, including an oblivious family that seems to keep walking in and out of frame. While we were at the conference, we got an Airbnb in a very squatchy location. Two of our very best friends, San and Sherry Oriavong, who run the Bigfoot Evidence Facebook page, which I will also link in the description, came along with us, and we had such a fun time at this house. It is completely spotless, and there is a game room, and it's just a lot of fun. So if you are ever in the Longview, Kelso area, and you want to search for Sasquatch or just go stay there, I will also link that Airbnb down in the description. The reason that we picked this spot is because it's actually in a fairly squatchy location. These woods right here will take you all the way to Mount St. Helens. If my audio recorder didn't break recently, I would have set it up here and hung some apples in the tree.
In 2012, we were invited by the North American Wood Ape Conservancy to visit Area X for us to give our opinion of what we thought was going on in the area. Because they'd have a lot of activity there for several years. They'd done camera project there in the area for several years before that, but they had started having interactions in 2011. So in 2012, we went and we stayed for a week in what's known as Area X. First day that we were there was pretty uneventful. There was a lot of people there, probably 15 people or so, but then the next day, of course, everybody was gone. So on Monday, we were having activity around the camp, and this is an area that has 4 primitive buildings. There are no electricity, no running water, anything like that down there, but they're old cabins with metal roofs. And we had been hearing late in the afternoon, we started hearing rocks, what sounded like rocks hitting the roof of these cabins. And there would be rock banging on the roof of one cabin. We would all go, all 5 of us there, would all go down that way and check that out. And then way off on the other end of this group of cabins, stuff would start banging on the roof down there. And we were going back and forth, trying to chase these sounds, and tree limbs breaking and crashing and wood knocks. And so there was a lot of activity going on. So Kathy decided that she says, you know what, I'm just going to stand here in the middle of all of this activity and just see what happens. So she stood up next to this little shed that was there. And as me and the other 3 guys are going back and forth checking out these sounds, she sees in the brush a limb being pulled down slowly and then let back up really slowly. And as I came by the next time we were checking out these sounds, she goes, Bob, why don't you stay here and hang out with me a few minutes? And she said, I saw some trees, some branches moving over there. Why don't you go check that out? And so now the other guys were off checking out the banging that was happening at one end and the other end. And so I went over there to this group of trees and brush, and there was like a little drainage ditch, a little depression in the ground there. There was this big fallen tree that was a giant tree at one time, had fallen, and it was across the little trail. And so you had to walk around it. And so I walked around this tree, and there's deadfall everywhere. And so I look into this brush, and I can see through to the other side, and I don't see anything. Of course, I'm looking for, Patty, the upright creatures, hiding, see if they were hiding or anything like that in there. And I didn't see anything, but I could see where something could be there and then leave without us seeing it, because it was so thick in that clump of brush. And so I got in a little closer, and I thought about walking across that fallen log to get across this ditch. And in doing so, I was checking out to see where I would put my feet. And I thought, well, I can, step on this big log here, and there's a couple smaller logs in the ditch there. And I thought, well, I can put 1 foot here, 1 foot on that log, 1 foot on that log. And I thought, I've only been here like 2 days, and so I don't want to break my leg, doing something, stupid like Daniel Boone style. So, and I could see through to the other side. So I chose not to do that. About 10 or 15 minutes after that, we came and sat down, and then some of the activity subsided. And so we were filming each other, sort of documenting what we had heard. And as our archivist, the guy who was doing all the filming little interviews, he had just set his phone down, his camera down, and Kathy looked up and said, "Oh, look, there they are." And within closer than 50 yards, we had a clear shot of 2 Bigfoot creatures walking sort of towards us. And there was like a little shed there, and it looked like they were headed from that clump of brush where I had been. I'd looked in, and Kathy saw the tree move towards the shed. Now, when Kathy saw them, she immediately jumps up and just takes off running at a dead run straight at them. And they stopped, and the one that was in front turned around and ran into the one that was walking right behind it. And they kind of stood there for a second and kind of shuffled and shuffled their feet, and then boom, they went up this hillside that was very steep and very difficult for humans. It was right behind the cabin to traverse, because we walked up there, and they went up like it was absolutely nothing. The first one went up on 2 feet, and she had we think she was female. She had her arms crossed across her chest like this as she ran up the hill, and her feet was kind of splayed out. The one that was just a little bit smaller than her went down on all 4s, and he went up the hillside on all 4s, pulling his way up this fallen tree that about a 6-inch diameter tree that had fallen down. And of course, the rest of that night, they disappeared, and it was absolute silence after that. When they ran up, it was completely quiet. We didn't smell anything. That evening, as sun started to set, we started having a lot of activity, rock throws. We saw several sets of glowing eyes. We could tell that we were surrounded by at least 4 creatures, maybe more, because we were getting rock throws from all 4 directions. And that night, we went into the cabin and turned in. Then we had rocks landing on the roof of the cabin, on the metal roof, and we were having slaps. The cabin was being slapped really hard during the middle of the night. So it was a pretty restless night for us. The next morning, we were again trying to video archive our experiences, and so Ken Stewart who was unfortunately the only one of the 5 of us that did not see these 2 creatures, because he was facing us, videotaping us, and we were all facing him, and all of these creatures that ran up the hill happened behind him. So by the time he got turned around, they were gone. But he wanted to do some more documentation, and so he was asking me, Bob, so tell me about you going over to these bushes and looking in there. And so we went over to the bushes, and I was showing him exactly what I did. And I said I came around this dead log, and then I looked down there, and I thought about putting my foot on one of those 2 logs right down there, and looked down in the ditch, and the ditch was completely clean. There was no logs down there at all. I said, check me out here and come look. And the ditch was completely clean. There wasn't even any wood or branches or anything down there. So these 2 logs, which I perceived as logs, were in fact the 2 Sasquatch that just a few minutes later we saw running up the hill. So that means they were there the entire time. The 4 of us were going back and forth within 15 feet of these things, and they were laying in the ditch the whole time. I can picture it in my mind, and what I can see is one creature laying completely in the ditch, and here's the fallen tree. One is completely down in the ditch, down behind the fallen tree, and laying perfectly still, and then another one was laying on top of the top portion of that creature, laying parallel right up against the log. We're supposing that the one that was on top was probably helping to keep the other one down. Maybe it had been a juvenile or something like that. They were in the 6 foot to 6.5 foot range as we saw them run up the hill. So at that point, my mind finally clicked and went, oh, I almost stepped on those logs. Those logs were Sasquatch laying there perfectly still, perfectly quiet, not moving, and my mind ran crazy as what would have happened had I stepped on those thinking it was a log. I don't know, would they let me do it? Would they grab my leg and beat me about the head and shoulders? I don't know, but we figured later that all the activity that was going on from the one end of the camp to the other end of the camp was diversionary tactics, because these 2 were caught in a spot that they shouldn't have been, and they were trying to draw us away from the spot. But they must have been some obstinate juveniles, because even when we were pulled away, diverted away, they stayed there. So it must have been very frustrating for the adults that were on the hillside trying to divert us away, and these 2 juvenile troublemakers stayed right in the area. So that's it has taken me a while to come to grips with, well, I mean, I'm okay, I lived, but I don't know what the outcome would have been had I tried to step across and actually stepped on it. I was probably 8 feet, 8 feet away from them, but they were dark, and it was in the early evening, so the shadows were really long, and they were down in the shadows, and my mind saw logs, but they weren't. It was Sasquatch laying in the ditch right next to me.
So we were in Oklahoma in an area named Area X, and this was the second day we were there, so it was a Monday, and the boys had been running around chasing something that was throwing rocks on top of the tin roofs of the cabins that were there, and I finally got tired of that, and I stayed back at the original cabin. And I'm just standing on the porch and looking around and just, observing what my environment was in case I need, to run or something like that. And there is a set of I'm going to call them bushy trees So they're taller than regular bushes, which I consider to be down like here, but these were obviously unmanaged bushes, and so they were really tall in the air. And I see something take the branch, go like this, look at me. I didn't see what was looking at me, but there was nothing else moving the branch that I could tell. And then slowly let him come back up. And so I knew that something was in those bushes. So when the boys come back, I tell Bob, I said, can you stay back with me because I want to talk to you about something? And he says, sure. And I said, something looked at me from those bushes. I want you to go over there and check it out. And he says, okay. And a couple of the other guys heard me say that, and they went on the back side of it and just went, oh, and it's nothing. And then another rock got thrown. So they ran after that. And so Bob goes and slides down there, and I'm staying in my same position because I want to see if it flees or whatever. I've got the best advantage of looking at it. And so Bob's looking in there, and I can see him looking, and he's parting the trees and looking around, and looks in there a little bit more, and he says, honey, there's nothing in here. And I said, are you sure? And he goes, no, there's just like 2 or 3 trees, or logs on the ground. And I said, well, okay, that's the way it is. Whatever it was got away before I had the chance to let Bob know so that he could look. So I'm like, okay, what it is. So we go back. The boys that had been running around at the cabins came back, and we were sitting around it's a fire pit, and I'm looking down what we call the bottleneck. And so Bob's right here, there's Brian Brown, Mark McClurkin, and then over here is the unnamed guy because he never sees anything. And we start hearing something rustling, and we just thought it was the fox that lived in the area that we were hand feeding, and we just thought he was coming back. And all of a sudden, I'm looking down the bottleneck, and I see a big one and a little one, Bigfoot. The big one I equate to like a teenager type size, and then there was a little one like your bratty little brother. And they're doing this really kind of keystone cop routine where the little one is trying to come towards, there was like a shed right over here. It looks like he was trying to get behind the shed, and the big one's trying to get it to go up the hill and away, and it's just this keystone cop kind of running into each other, kind of, you're not listening to me. And I said, there they are, and I got up and I ran at them. And so, because now they know they've been spotted, they turned and they went up that hillside faster than anything I've ever seen in my life. And I arrived just in time to get right behind the big one and look at its muscle structure, and it had a booty that was just all muscular, and it put its arms down to its side like this, like a power runner, and put its head down as it ran up the hill. And so it was very fluid, and it was always interesting because when they were coming at us, they were very loud and noisy, but when they ran up the hill, it was completely different. It was just quiet and elegant, and not this kind of keystone or cops routine kind of thing. And so I was just amazed by its muscles that it had on its thighs and its buttocks, but also about how it glided over all the vegetation and loose rocks and all that stuff just effortlessly. I mean, it was just amazing how it did it. And so, it was pretty fantastic, and we had all kinds of other stuff happen to us the rest of that week. We had rock throws. We had, I heard a vocalization of a wahooga right outside where we were sleeping. And I took it to be like a frustrated Sasquatch because we wouldn't come out, and they wanted to observe us more, and we were, being quite frustrating. And so it was traumatizing week all at the same time as being a great week, because, you know, that was my first ever sighting, and here I've been doing Bigfooting forever, and finally get to see a Bigfoot. Not only do I get to see a Bigfoot, it's close by, there's 2 of them, and I get more than just 1 second, you know, a half a second, you know, I get a little bit of time, not as much time as I wanted, but it turned out kind of being a little bit ironic, because we did have a camera that was set up that would have been triggered had I waited like maybe a half a second more, and it would have gotten them instead of it got me running after them. And so I kind of, you know, do I wish I had done that differently? And in the end, no, because I don't think I would have gotten to see as much of their body structure that I did if I hadn't ran at them when I did. So no regrets. Well, then the following year, Bob and I each went for 6 weeks, 3 weeks apiece by ourselves. So 3 weeks I went and Bob watched the kids, and then he went 3 weeks, I watched the kids. He went before me, and I was sitting on the back patio. Not a patio, I mean, it's not a patio, it's a crappy little cabin. It's a board above the ground, I guess. And I'm just sitting there, and I have a higher advantage than everybody else, and I heard something up in the tree, and I look up in the tree, and there's this little tiny thing about the size of a dog, no tail, flat butt, and it's going to the end on all fours, using all 4 of its hands and its feet, so to the end of the branch, and then it goes bounce, 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 and then he goes woo like this, put his arms out and jumped up to the next branch, and so broke part of it as it was landed, because it was pretty heavy. And then I said, hey, I just saw a baby Bigfoot. We ran after it, and everybody else saw was it making the rounds through the branches. They could see the branches bouncing. And then that a little later that week, another member of that group saw the same one in a different tree. So I don't know where Mom was, but that baby was feeling pretty good about jumping from tree to tree, and it was just pretty amazing, because obviously they can't be born 7 feet tall. What do the little ones do?
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating, because there's not many reports of visual sightings of the small ones, you know.
And it was quite startling, because my first initial thought was, oh, I'm looking at a chimpanzee in a tree. I mean, that's what logically made sense to me, is that, you know, I saw those at the zoo, you know, kind of. So for me, I was just like, oh, there's a chimp. And then it dawned on me, oh, that's no chimp, that's a Bigfoot. And so it was that the rest of the week for us was also pretty dramatic for just, we were mostly all women on that group. And we just had all kinds of crazy stuff happen. They tried to push a tree down on us. They were just making more loud sounds than ever before, and just trying to intimidate us and stuff. So we survived the week, and then that was 2013. And then in 2014, I had a good brief glimpse. I was the last one to get up that morning or come out of the door of the cabin. And I'll go ahead and just, Ken Stewart has seen me see Bigfoot more than he's ever seen a Bigfoot. So we like to kid him about that. But he was talking to me while I was standing on the porch, but he's on the ground level. So I'm like a foot taller than him, talking to him. And I happened to look up, and then all of a sudden there was this big, we call him Old Gray, huge, large male walk through an opening and then turn. And I said, hey, I just saw a Bigfoot. And the guys all ran over there and found where he had gone down the creek bed and moved off on the creek, but couldn't track him further after that. And so I stayed where I was, because I wanted to put somebody whose height I knew into that same space and see how they looked in comparison to this huge gray thing. And Bob was this little tiny little thing compared to this thing that was like basically this. It filled this amount of area, and Bob was this much of that area. And so people who have seen Big Gray think he's like one of those rare 10-footers, you know, the extreme end of size. And he had the biggest body ever. I mean, just the big. I saw him from basically the top of his knees up to about his chin. And so,
how many do you think were in the area over the years that you spent there?
Oh, well, we've counted them up, including the young one that would, like, let's say he's 10. Then the teenager female that I believe she would have been equivalent, like maybe 15 years old. Then that same week, Bob saw a red colored one. Then later that week, one of our members was bum rushed by 2 older black ones. And so Old Gray had already been seen before that particular week. So just there, that's 6.
Wow.
And so we think the 2 dark black ones that were the bum rush, we think they were the troublemakers of the group, in the sense because other people had seen them 2 together before. And so I think it's a family group, and the male probably isn't there, the dominant male, all the time, but the rest of the core family group lived somewhere very near there, and for whatever reason tracked through that area to get a resource, because we could almost predict it, in the sense of it go down the hill through the property, go do it, and then we'd have the same thing come back later on. And so I think it was something they were getting in this little round they were doing. What it was, we don't know.
So they would just kind of like run a circuit?
Yeah, run a circuit. It was not every day, not every time. Sometimes they'd stay closer to the cabin most of the night and just throw rock after rock after rock after rock. There's one time there were so many rocks being thrown, I just gave up. I was just like, I'm not noting anymore. I've been doing this for hours. I'm not going to write down one more rock that throw, because they were just, little tiny ones, and they would purposely try to get it between 2 people like this. And they were pretty good shots. Occasionally they'd get a little bit close to your foot, but not often. They were good shots. So, and then other times it was earlier in the morning, and they would slap the side of the cabin to try to jar us awake, or mess with something. And then sometimes we'd be in bed and they come by and do some really crazy stuff. Like there was a pan that was turned over. That most people keep their dishes in their cabin, but this place you kept your dishes in the ground in the dirt outside, and then you'd use it anyway when you wanted to cook. And there was an upside down pan on the side of the cabin, and one night we hear this ping, 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 ping. It's like something's tapping on it, and then it clearly stepped on the dilapidated porch, and the whole cabin goes like that. You could feel the weight of the animal stepping on the porch, and the whole cabin just turning, and then we had dust coming out of the rafters, and that really freaked a couple people out, where they just were, I've had it, I'm not doing this anymore, I quit. The morning after the sightings, I was getting dressed, and I was the last one out of the cabin, and I come outside, and it's like this whole bad vibe is in the air, like something awful had happened. And I'm like going, oh my God, and what's going on? And so Brian Brown goes, Kathy, last night when Bob was talking to you about the bush over there, what did he say? And I said, he said there was nothing in there but 2 or 3 logs laying on the ground. And he looked at me and he goes, guess how many's there now? And I went, no, there's just no. They were there the whole time, and Bob had the opportunity of a lifetime. He almost stepped on them. And I remember thinking to myself, that was God's will, because had Bob stepped on those, we have no clue what could have happened. It could have killed him, killed me. We don't know. And so I always figured that we were meant to have the sighting, but we weren't meant to go further than that at that time. So it was just what could have been. You have to live with that.
Oh, there you saw an Oreo.
I like the Starlink.
Yeah, you want to tell us about your Facebook page?
Bigfoot Evidence. I think we're almost at 500,000 subscribers. So we're getting there. I think 5,000 more should be there. But yeah, Bigfoot Evidence.
That's awesome.
We do live streams every Sunday. And we're out here doing live streams today, and we did one yesterday. So.
You guys are out of California, though?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Sacramento.